On this Wednesday night, an entire city going under quarantine. The center of China's coronavirus outbreak to be closed off to public transportation.
It's a big challenge to the Chinese authorities.
More deaths, more patients, and the lessons learned from Canada's experience with SARS. Deadly vacation in Quebec. A snowmobiling ride turns tragic for a group of tourists. And was the world's richest man hacked?
I think absurd is exactly the right word.
The suspicions Saudi Arabia targeted Amazon's CEO. Plus, humor.
God knows I want to break free.
And heartwarming gestures born in a blizzard.
Thank you.
Global National with Dawna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with drastic measures being taken to try to contain the outbreak of a mysterious pneumonia-like virus. Chinese authorities are effectively putting a quarantine on an entire city, cutting off Wuhan, where the potentially deadly coronavirus first emerged in December. Planes, trains, buses, subways, and ferries to and from that city of 11 million will be suspended tomorrow. The aim is to cut off transmission of the virus, but it is spreading. At least 17 people have died. More than 500 others are infected. There are now confirmed cases in South Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, Japan, and the U.S. There are no confirmed cases here in Canada, though tonight 5 people in Quebec who recently returned from China are being monitored. The World Health Organization has teams on the ground in China and is holding off on declaring a global health emergency for now. It's advising governments to be vigilant and ready to test anyone who has traveled to the affected region and has symptoms like cough and fever. Crystal Goomansingh has our top story tonight.
They have no option but to get up close and care for those who are ill. The new strain of the coronavirus is spreading fast in China and beyond. Chinese officials in Wuhan have made masks mandatory and are implementing drastic measures to limit people's movements.
Taking the action that they think is appropriate is very important. We stress to them that by having a strong action, not only they will control the outbreak in their country, but they will also minimize the chances of this outbreak spreading internationally.
In Wuhan, where the virus first appeared in December, hospitals are overrun with people with flu-like symptoms. But in some cases, it can be much more serious. This new virus is in the same family as the common cold. It's triggering fear because it's also the same chain as SARS. Europe's busiest airport, Heathrow, will be screening for signs of illness on planes and asking more questions of people when they land.
We're also asking them to self-declare, in other words, if they have any signs or symptoms, to let us know so that that can be assessed and any appropriate further assessment.
In just a few days, the virus has led to hundreds of confirmed cases and more than a dozen deaths. Containing the virus is critical. Wuhan is a large center and a commercial hub. UK officials anticipate the infection rate will reach into the thousands.
It is vital, clearly, that we understand the rate of human-to-human transmission. That will determine, frankly, how the feasibility of control, and if control is feasible, what measures will be needed.
There is no vaccine. The virus is new, so no one knows exactly what it can do, and there's always potential for it to mutate. Officials with the World Health Organization will meet again Thursday as it continues to monitor the virus. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Trying to contain an outbreak of an infectious virus while not completely shutting down trade and travel is a balancing act. Canada's experience during the SARS outbreak in 2003, when 44 Canadians died, taught authorities many lessons. Tonight, Eric Sorensen takes a closer look at the new coronavirus and how ready Canada is for it.
In Shanghai, they quickly sold out of face masks. As viruses go, it's still not clear how transmissible and how severe the novel coronavirus is.
how efficient is human-to-human transmission? Because really that's going to be one of the driving forces behind whether or not this turns into something a little bit larger or whether or not we're able to get this under control a little bit quicker.
There are many coronaviruses, from the new novel coronavirus to severe cases like SARS to the common cold. Coronaviruses are commonplace among animals. It's when they spread animals to humans, then from human to human, the risks increase.
The novel coronavirus was first found in Wuhan, China, and has spread to nearby countries and to the United States. There is so much travel from China to the rest of the world, a further spread is entirely realistic. Compare with SARS. It also began in China. In 2003, there were more than 8,000 cases. 90% were in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. But SARS spread to more than 30 countries. And outside Southeast Asia, Canada was as hard hit as any other country. An estimated 250 cases and 44 deaths.
It's been 18 years since SARS, and this is looking has many similarities to SARS in terms of a big outbreak in China with lots of people hospitalised and some indications of international spread. Is it of international concern? Definitely.
Toronto in particular was hard hit by SARS and the global reaction to it. The World Health Organization told travellers to avoid coming here. Pamphlets were distributed at the airport. Healthcare workers were forced to wear more protection. Hospitals restricted visitors. Thousands of people were quarantined. Hand sanitizing became a widespread practice in 2003. Canada seems much better prepared now.
Certainly there's education and screening at ports of entry for this. We now have tests and instructions to healthcare providers on how to manage cases. As bad as SARS was, the hospitals here are certainly well prepared now from after that experience to deal with imported infectious diseases.
The global response to the new coronavirus has been much quicker than it was for SARS, thanks in part to China's transparency in reporting it early. Still, the number of international cases is bound to rise, and just one case in Canada could create a national sense of urgency given this country's experience with SARS. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The airport in St. John's, Newfoundland has finally reopened to commercial flights after the massive blizzard there.
Yes, 6 days later, I got a flight home.
Flights resumed at 5 a.m., bringing relief to those who have been stranded since the storm hit on Friday. About 400 flights to and from St. John's were cancelled when the airport was snowed in and shut down. Air Canada and WestJet are adding some flights in the next couple of days to get the backlog of passengers on their way. And the cleanup from that monster snowstorm is going to take a while. The Canadian military says 400 troops on the ground will stay as long as needed. They're helping dig out the homes of elderly and vulnerable people. A state of emergency, though, remains in effect in St. John's, so crews can safely clear all that snow from the streets. The city expects to lift all restrictions by 6 a.m. Saturday. That means most businesses are still closed. There are driving restrictions until then, though taxis and heating oil trucks are now being allowed on the roads. Essential services like medical clinics and some food banks have also been allowed to reopen. In Quebec, a snowmobile trip for a group of French tourists has ended tragically. 5 are missing, and their tour guide from Montreal is dead after their snowmobiles plunged through the ice on a river. It happened near the mouth of a river on the eastern side of Lac Saint-Jean, north of the city of Alma. That's about 200 kilometers north of Quebec City. Every winter, about 30,000 tourists, many of them from France, go to Quebec to snowmobile. Mike Armstrong explains what we know about how this trip went badly wrong.
2 police helicopters spent most of the day in the air searching, while below, divers were in the water. One of the helicopters actually crashed during the search. The pilot was alone. He's injured, but his life is not in danger. Police say officers are still holding out hope, checking local cottages and cabins in case the snowmobilers found refuge, but the odds are slim. The group rented their machines in Saint-Michel-des-Saints, about 270 kilometers away. They were 8 tourists from France and a guide traveling along provincial trails. Well, it appears Tuesday night they left the trails. There's speculation the guide may have been taking a shortcut and they ended up on the ice. Locals say everyone knows not to go on the ice in that area. The current is too strong and the ice doesn't always freeze thick enough. Well, 7 members of the group fell through. 1 got out right away. He and the other 2 tourists went to a convenience store for help. Their machines were still there this afternoon. The clerk at the store says the snowmobilers were calling their friends, trying to see if they were okay. They weren't panicking because they didn't know they were in the water. Well, 4 hours later, police found the 42-year-old guide. He was alive, but died in hospital. The 5 others may have been carried away by the current. The Quebec government says there will be an investigation and that the province was already looking at new training and qualification programs for guides. The Provincial Snowmobiling Association says this event shows their activity can be dangerous and people should stick to trails. This week is also International Snowmobile Safety Week. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
A former Canadian Army reservist from Manitoba linked to a violent white supremacist group has been denied bail in a U.S. court. A federal judge called Patrick Matthews a very dangerous person who espouses very dangerous beliefs. Matthews was arrested last week by the FBI, along with 2 other alleged members of a far-right group called The Base. The FBI had been watching them and searched their Delaware apartment. Among the things they found were videos Matthews recorded wearing a gas mask, espousing racist and anti-Semitic rhetoric, calling for violent revolution. A motion filed in court also alleges he discussed ambushing civilians and police at a gun rights rally in Virginia this week. Matthews is charged with several firearms offenses, and if convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison. To some breaking political news here at home. Rona Ambrose, former MP and interim leader of the federal Conservative Party, has decided not to seek the leadership.
I have really struggled with the decision to return to political life. I loved my 13 years in public service as an MP, a minister, and especially as leader of this great party. But right now, I'm focused on making a difference through the private sector, creating policy and advocating for our energy sector to create jobs.
In that video, Ambrose says she also wants to continue her work to ensure Canadian judges have sexual assault law training. The Conservative Party is due to select a new leader in June. In Washington, those involved in the impeachment trial of President Donald Trump got into heated arguments over what shape that trial should take. At the heart of it are allegations Trump pressured Ukraine to investigate his political rival. Tonight, the president is thousands of kilometers away in Davos, Switzerland, and he seemed to brag about his ability to obstruct the work of Congress during the trial. Our Washington bureau chief, Jackson Prosco, joins me. Jackson, walk us through what the president said and why it matters.
Well, Dawna, Trump was asked this morning if he had committed an impeachable offense. He responded by suggesting Congress doesn't have the full story because he won't share key information with lawmakers.
We're doing very well. I got to watch enough. I thought our team did a very good job. But honestly, we have all the material. They don't have the material.
So the president is essentially boasting about the fact that the White House has not turned over documents or produced witnesses. Remember, they largely refused to cooperate with the House impeachment inquiry, and the Senate was up late last night until nearly 2 in the morning, where Republicans blocked any measures to subpoena documents or witnesses, at least for now. What this means is that for the next 6 days, we're going to hear essentially a rehash of the evidence and arguments that we've already heard. And in the unlikely event that Republicans do vote to allow witnesses at some point later in the trial, Trump is already threatening that he'll claim executive privilege to block them. Dawna?
Well, Jackson, some moderate Republicans have said they'd be open to calling witnesses. Is there any reason to think that they might?
Well, it would take 4 of them, but there's not a lot of reason to think that's going to happen, at least not right now. Some Republicans, in fact, are already laying the groundwork to say there's no need to hear from witnesses because we already know the arguments that both sides are going to make over the next 6 days.
I think the record is pretty complete.
I'm opposed to having any more witnesses because you don't need them. And that's if you have 1 or 2 or 3 witnesses, then they're going to ask for more because it's a stalling technique.
So, Dawna, all of this is to say that as of right now, there's no reason to expect that there's going to be anything to steer Republicans off course from their plans to acquit President Trump and move on from impeachment as quickly as possible.
Okay, Jackson Prosco in Washington, thanks. Saudi Arabia's staunch denials coming up why it's accused of hacking the phone belonging to Amazon's CEO. There are reports the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos, had his phone hacked by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Bezos owns Amazon and The Washington Post. That's the paper that employed murdered journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Two UN human rights experts want a full investigation, saying it appears to be an attempt to influence, if not silence, reporting on Saudi Arabia. The Guardian newspaper reports Bezos had his mobile phone hacked in 2018 through a WhatsApp message reportedly sent by the personal account of the Saudi Crown Prince. It's alleged the encrypted video contained malware that enabled surveillance of Bezos' phone.
I think absurd is exactly the right word. The idea that the Crown Prince would hack Jeff Bezos' phone is absolutely silly.
In 2018, Saudi Arabia had been critical of the Washington Post coverage, including columnist Jamal Khashoggi, who was an outspoken critic of the regime. He was then tortured, killed, and dismembered inside Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. Today, Bezos said nothing, but he did tweet this photo with the hashtag Jamal. It was taken at a vigil in 2019, commemorating the one-year anniversary of Khashoggi's murder. Terry Jones, co-founder and co-star of the Monty Python comedy troupe, has passed away at the age of 77. 4 years ago, he'd been diagnosed with a rare form of dementia.
Now you listen here. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. Now.
Anyone who knows it knows that's from Life of Brian, which Jones directed, one of his countless achievements. He was both a star on screen and a genius behind the scenes. Fellow Python Sir Michael Palin said today he was far more than one of the funniest writer-performers of his generation. He was the complete Renaissance comedian, writer, director, presenter, historian, brilliant children's author, and the warmest, most wonderful company you could wish to have. We're back in a moment.
Always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the light side of life.
There's a massive resource project being planned in this country, and if built, it would be one of the largest oil sands mines ever built in Alberta. The Teck Frontier mine, 25 kilometers south of Wood Buffalo National Park, would cover 24,000 hectares. That's about twice the size of Vancouver. At its peak, it would produce 260,000 barrels of bitumen every day. That would take up about half the capacity that will be available when the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion is built. The Teck Frontier mine would generate 4 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions every year. The final decision on approval is now in the hands of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's cabinet. Tonight, Heather Urix West looks at the difficult balancing act.
Build that mine! Build that mine! On the streets of Calgary, with construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline now underway, focus has shifted to a new oil and gas project. Last month, when Alberta's Premier sat down with the Prime Minister in Ottawa, the proposed Teck Frontier oil sands mega project was among the first topics discussed.
That would create 10,000 jobs, $70 billion in revenue for governments to pay for healthcare and education.
The proposal comes at a difficult time for the industry. Investor confidence in Canada's energy sector is low. This analyst believes anything but an approval could kill any future investments.
I could see this province going ballistic. And I think that's going to be a real stab in the heart of the province.
Alberta and Ottawa have agreed on an overall emissions cap for the oil sands, and this project would not exceed that limit. But it would mean overall carbon emissions would increase. It's why environmentalists are calling on Ottawa to reject Teck, enlisting some star power in recent weeks from celebrities like Joaquin Phoenix, Jane Fonda, and Martin Sheen.
While there is some opposition to this mega project, there is also support, and the company has signed agreements with 14 Indigenous communities in the region.
Do I believe and do I agree with the fact that there are going to be major impacts? Absolutely. But that's what mitigation is for, and that's why we did the work for over 2 years to be able to ensure that we are mitigating everything we possibly can on the project.
The Fort McKay Métis president is urging Ottawa to approve the mine. In an exclusive interview with Global News earlier this month, the Prime Minister said the decision is being weighed carefully.
We are going through that process right now, and that process will result in a decision, but I'm not going to prejudge what that decision might be.
But the choice must be made soon. Under Canada's Environmental Assessment Act, Cabinet's decision is due by the end of February. Heather Urix West, Global News, Calgary.
Next, cold days, warm hearts in Newfoundland and Labrador. The wild winter weather that battered Newfoundland set a lot of people back, but couldn't cool the spirit of the place. The way Newfoundlanders pulled together after the storm and took their troubles in stride is no surprise to those who know and love the province. And as Ross Lord reports, it's a lesson all of us can learn from.
In a province where leaning on each other comes naturally, they fight a record-setting blizzard with historic generosity.
People have been shut in for a few days and are probably pretty hungry, so we're hoping to put out 60 to 100 meals today, so people can withstand this state of emergency a little bit longer.
Most restaurants are shut down, but Stella's Circle charity got special permission to make special meals at its cafe for the homeless and others who are unable to go out and feed themselves. As they discard the mountains of snow, Newfoundlanders treasure the things worth keeping, including moments of levity.
Well, it's because I left the window open and all the snow is in the car. Go!
Laughter, a tried and true method of countering adversity, along with the soothing power of song.
I want to break free.
Housebound for days on end by claustrophobia-inducing snowbanks, good material for a tune.
I don't want to see the snow anymore.
On top of the countless number of volunteers shoveling out their neighbors, taxi companies are providing free rides to seniors and people with disabilities.
Congested mostly. A lot of the streets were just one-way streets, but other than that, everybody was patient and giving everybody a break.
Some people are extra grateful. Christopher Rose is making meal deliveries for Stella's Circle participants, including himself.
I get one of myself, which is I'm very, very, very thankful for getting some actual nutritious meal. It beats storm chips for once.
Enduring the extremes of bad weather by using their own good nature.
I want to break free.
Ross Lord, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Dawna Friesen. Tonight's Here in Canada is these two brothers, Asher and Kyler, peddling their homemade Zamboni around their backyard rink in Vernon, BC. Could have used them in Newfoundland. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.